I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. Look about you while repeating the idea. Then close your eyes and apply the idea to your inner world. You will escape from both together. For the inner is the cause of the outer. Remind yourself that you are making a declaration of independence in the name of your own freedom. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. What a wonderful discovery to know that. Well, I'm a miracle teacher or forgiveness teacher. They both are the same thing, from the Ozarks. And I'm could call me Forgiveness Willie or Miracle Willie, or just call me Willie, or my actual name is William Edward Perkins. So I shorten it to Willie. Anyway, glad you've come to join me here on January 31st of 2024, lesson 31. And today is my first, who I consider to be my first guru, was my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, Bernard Julius Hebink. He was born on this day in 1906 in Indian Territory. He was known by BJ or Bernie. Anyway, I so appreciate him. I thought I'd make him honorable mention. I am not the victim of the world I see. And we're learning that the cause of the world we see is our inner thoughts and beliefs, because the incredible power that we were created in the image of God, and our beliefs and our thoughts, particularly the more obvious ones, make the world we see. But even the ones that we're not aware of are making what we think is real. So we'll come back and we'll read that here in a little bit. But before we do, let's go look at our text reading in chapter 4, The Illusions of the Ego. And we're ready for Roman numeral 5, The Ego-Body Illusion. All things work together for good is the very first sentence. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. Okay, now let me tell you why he might have said that, and I think it's a key point that we need to understand. That's taken from a Bible reference in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, which when my wife died, the mother of my 6 children, in a car wreck back in 1992, I hung on to that passage. And actually that phrase, it was before I'd read it in A Course in Miracles, but I was using it from the Bible. And I'd already come to recognize that what the Bible said is, it says, all things work together for good to those who love God and who are called according to His purpose. Well, in my mind, I thought, well, do you have to love God and be called according to His purpose for everything to work out for good? Well, maybe not, but you won't recognize it unless you love God and are trying to follow His will. I think that's the way I kind of saw it. Well, look how Jesus explains it. I just love that idea, though. All things work together for good, and we can just hang out there. He says, the next sentence, there are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. The ego exerts maximal vigilance about what it permits into awareness, and this is not the way a balanced mind holds together. The ego is thrown further off balance because it keeps its primary motivation from your awareness and raises control rather than sanity to predominance. The ego has every reason to do this according to the thought system which gave rise to it and which it serves. Sane judgment would inevitably judge against the ego and must be obliterated by the ego in the interest of self-preservation. The ego's self-preservation. He'll explain. Let's listen. A major source of the ego's off-balance state is its lack of discrimination between the body and the thoughts of God. Thoughts of God are unacceptable to the ego because they clearly point to the non-existence of the ego itself. The ego, therefore, either distorts them or refuses to accept them. It cannot, however, make them cease to be. It therefore tries to conceal not only unacceptable body impulses, but also the thoughts of God, because both are threatening to it. Being concerned primarily with its own preservation in the face of threat, the ego perceives them as the same, unacceptable body impulses and thoughts of God. By perceiving them as the same, the ego attempts to save itself from being swept away, as it would surely be in the presence of knowledge. Any thought system, in paragraph 3, any thought system that confuses God and the body must be insane. Wow. Any thought system that confuses God and the body must be insane. Yet this confusion is essential to the ego, which judges only in terms of threat or non-threat to itself. In one sense, the ego's fear of God is at least logical, since the idea of Him or God does dispel the ego. But fear of the body, with which the ego identifies so closely, makes no sense at all. Paragraph 4. The body is the ego's home by its own election. It is the only identification with which the ego feels safe, since the body's vulnerability is its own best argument that you cannot be of God. This is the belief that the ego sponsors eagerly, yet the ego hates the body because it cannot accept it as good enough to be its home. Here is where the mind becomes actually dazed. Being told by the ego that it is really part of the body and that the body is its protector, the mind is also told that the body cannot protect it. Therefore, the mind asks, "Where can I go for protection?" To which the ego replies, "Turn to me." The mind, and not without cause, reminds the ego that it has itself insisted that it is identified with the body, so there is no point in turning to it for protection. The ego has no real answer to this because there is none, but it does have a typical solution. It obliterates the question from the mind's awareness. Once out of awareness, the question can and does produce uneasiness, but it cannot be answered because it cannot be asked. Well, he's explaining what goes on at a level that we probably have not recognized, very many of us anyway. I know I hadn't. I'm learning it with you all from my reading. But it's like Jesus sees things that are way beyond our perceptual tendencies, what we're used to seeing and what we've thought about. He's letting us know what would have had to have happened in thought. So if you can accept that, it'll speed you along your way. Paragraph 5. This is the question that must be asked. Where can I go for protection? Where can I go for protection is the question that must be asked. Seek and ye shall find. And that's a quote out of Jesus' talking in Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 and 8. Seek and ye shall find does not mean that you should seek blindly and desperately for something you would not recognize. Meaningful seeking is consciously undertaken, consciously organized, and consciously directed. The goal must be formulated clearly and kept in mind. Learning and wanting to learn are inseparable. You learn best when you believe what you are trying to learn is of value to you. Now, before I go any further, let me just point out that those last 3 or 4 sentences are, in my mind, is what's required for scientific observation. So let's read it again with that in mind and think about what he's really saying here. Meaningfully, so he's basing all this on he's saying that the question that must be asked is, where can I go for protection? Seek and you shall find does not mean that you should seek blindly and desperately for something you would not recognize. Now here's the part that I think is very scientific. Meaningful seeking is consciously undertaken, consciously organized, and consciously directed. The goal must be formulated clearly and kept in mind. So you make a theorem, and then you have to research it out. You keep it in mind as you're doing your proofs and observations, the scientific method. And then it goes on, the goal must be formulated clearly and kept in mind. Learning and wanting to learn are inseparable. You learn best when you believe what you're trying to learn is of value to you. However, not everything you may want to learn has lasting value. Indeed, many of the things you want to learn may be chosen because their value will not last. And the last paragraph, 6. The ego thinks that it is an advantage not to commit itself to anything that is eternal, because the eternal must come from God. Eternalness is the one function the ego has tried to develop but has systematically failed to achieve. The ego compromises with the issue of the eternal, just as it does with all issues touching on the real question in any way. By becoming involved with tangential issues, it hopes to hide the real question and keep it out of mind. When you sit down to meditate, you might find yourself jumping up to go do something that you hadn't thought of until you got yourself mind quiet. That could be the ego trying to lead you to do something different. I notice a lot of acts of my ego. Like the other day when I was reading to y'all, and I said, and God is not in that wastebasket, or God is not in, and I named all those things and didn't even catch it. I would count that as just ego sabotage. Anyway, it's something to laugh about and trust the Holy One for guidance. So, by becoming involved with tangential issues, it hopes to hide the real question and keep it out of mind. The ego's characteristic busyness with non-essentials is for precisely that purpose. Preoccupation with problems set up to be incapable of solution are favorite ego devices for impeding learning progress. In all these diversionary tactics, however, the one question that is never asked by those who pursue them is, what for? What is the question? What for? This is the question that you must learn to ask in connection with everything. What for? Why? What for? What are we using this for? What is the purpose? Whatever it is, it will direct your efforts automatically. When you make a decision of purpose, then you have made a decision about your future effort, a decision that will remain in effect unless you change your mind. I love the way he says that. Now, to me, I just laughed about that so much last time. I'm going to read that last sentence again. When you make a decision of purpose, then you have made a decision about your future effort, a decision that will remain in effect unless you change your mind. You have the power, and you can change your mind for the good or for the worse. Okay, good or for the worse, good or for the better. All right, I am not a victim of the world I see. Before we actually read that, what's going on around the world? Well, I told you about my grandfather, B.J. Hebank's birthday today. Thank you, Grandpa. Appreciate your Social Security check day. Backward day, just a silly day to talk and dress backwards. Brandy Alexander Day. Well, Brandy Alexander has two meanings. I'm not sure which one this one was about. It's a drink made from cacao, cream, and brandy. And also there's a Canadian actress named Brandy Alexander. She's Filipino, European, and African is her genetics. Eat Brussels Sprouts Day. And I might mention that I found on sowtrueseeds.com, which I'll put their link in the description below. They had a lot of good stuff about what to do in your garden at different times of the year. And Mother Earth News has a lot too. But both of those two places said that it's a good time to start your garden vegetables, particularly your cold things, like all your cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, and then your lettuces and stuff. Time to get all those started if you like starting them indoors and putting them out, which I think is a really nice way to do it. Find a sunny window and get them started. Hell is freezing over day. Basically just here in the cold part of the winter. It's cold is the idea. Hug an Economist Day. Inspire your heart with Arts Day. And anyway, when thinking about economy or economists, think about how that economies change based on the political regime and the way that the people have organized or been forced to organize their lives because of politics. And that's what kind of trickles down, you might say, into economics. That'd be a different way of you thinking of trickle-down economics. Inspire your heart with the Arts Day. And I might mention, I'm sitting in front of these bamboos, and you know, it looks like that real cold spell we got is really causing the leaves, and I expect they're going to all die. And then I'll mow them down, and they'll sprout right back up. I like to mow them down when that happens, though, or so that they get fresh start. It happened 2 years ago, and it's happened this year now, it looks like. We'll know for sure in another few days, but it looks like they're kind of drying out and dying. Bamboo does pretty good in cold weather and stays green, but it won't handle if it gets down. Someone told me it got down to 20 below zero here. I don't know if it got that cold or not. I kind of get confused on whether they're talking about wind chill factor or just the temperature, because really it's the wind chill's a result of what it feels cold like rather than what it really is cold. Inspire your heart with the Arts Day. National Hot Chocolate Day. Cold days of winter, drink some hot chocolate, huh? Scotch Tape Day was invented by Richard Gurley Thru in 1925, and he was trying to figure out a way to two-tone paint on these cars that were rolling out. And so he thought, well, I'll just make some tape. So he was the inventor. And Sweet Children Day. Oh, Street Children Day. Maybe not a big problem in the United States, but in many places of the world, lots of parents that are not able to care for their children, and they become street children. And in edible landscaping, we have the Marseille, which is a French word, Marseille fig, the Ficus carica. Large yellow figs ripen the end of July on previous season's growth. So you'll have to protect them if you're in zone 6, if you're going to grow these through the winter. Put a wire around them, fill it with dried leaves, and put a covering over the top, and try to keep them dry and from freezing, or at least from getting too cold. A little protection. Very productive and early ripening. produces an early main crop of short-necked, delicate, sweet fruit. The plant slows its growth into the fall and hardens off well. There's usually no young wood dieback the following spring. Usually starts ripening a few weeks before hardy Chicago and ends its production before hardy Chicago does. Space 8 to 10 foot circles in zone 6 through 9. Also called Oregon Prolific and St. Anthony fig. St. Anthony. That's the saint that most Catholic folks pray to when they lose something. St. Anthony, help me find this. Okay, I knew that because my mom would always ask St. Anthony for help when she lost something. Okay, and in edible landscaping for beginners, the Baxia genera, she talks about, knowing about those. There's 170 species of Baxias. They're from Australia. They're heavy producers of nectar. So that means they attract many types of birds and small animals. We'll have to look into Baxias. All right, now let's go look at our lesson for the day. And it's a short lesson, but let's read through it. I am not the victim of the world I see. Today's idea is the introduction to your declaration of release. Again, the idea should be applied to both the world you see without and the world you see within. In applying the idea, we will use a form of practice which will be used more and more with changes as indicated. Generally speaking, the form includes two aspects. One in which you apply the idea on a more sustained basis. Your practice period would be a more sustained basis. And the other consisting of frequent applications of the idea throughout the day. So we're going to have two longer practice periods with the idea for today. One in the morning and one at night. 3 to 5 minutes for each of these are recommended. During that time, look about you slowly while repeating the idea 2 or 3 times. Then close your eyes and apply the same idea to your inner world. You will escape from both together, for the inner world is the cause of the outer. And this next paragraph, I'm going to encourage you to read that 2 or 3 times. Really get a sense of doing this. It's a really wonderful explanation of a powerful meditation. As you survey your inner world, merely let whatever thoughts cross your mind come into your awareness, each to be considered for a moment and then replaced by the next. Try not to establish any kind of hierarchy among them. Watch them come and go as dispassionately as possible, calmly, kind of detached, dispassionately. Do not dwell on any one in particular, but try to let the stream move on evenly and calmly without any special investment on your part. As you sit and quietly watch your thoughts, repeat today's idea to yourself as often as you care to, but with no sense of hurry. And then next paragraph 4. In addition, repeat the idea for today as often as possible during the day. Remind yourself that you're making a declaration of independence in the name of your own freedom, independence from your ego, in the name of your own freedom. And in your freedom lies the freedom of the world. In your freedom lies the freedom of the world. The idea for today is also a particularly useful one to use as a response to any form of temptation that may arise. It is a declaration that you will not yield to it and put yourself in bondage. Okay, well, let's try that meditation. We'll start by just looking around and saying our word. Maybe you can do it while I'm singing the song. I've taken the song from that lesson, and so maybe it'll help you to remember what to do. I'm not the victim of the the victim of the world I see. Just look around. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I get the right chords there. I'm not the victim of the world I see. Look about you while repeating the idea. Then close your eyes and apply the idea to your inner world. You will escape from both together. For the inner is the cause of the outer. Remind yourself that you are making a declaration of independence in the name of your own freedom. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. Now, as you look out at your inner world, I'll be a little more quiet. I'm not the victim of the world I see. Victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. Look about you while repeating the idea. Then close your eyes and apply the idea to your inner world. You will escape from both together. For the inner is the cause of the outer. For the inner is the cause of the outer. Remind yourself that you are making a declaration of independence in the name of your own freedom. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm not the victim of the world I see. You're the maker of the world you see. Begin to decide which thoughts are worth holding on to, and the ones that are worthy, hold on to those. The ones that aren't, let them go. I am not the victim of the world I see, and our Polish word for peace is Pokój. So, I am not the victim of the world I see. Pokój.